Okay, triathletes, moving from the comfort of your pool to the unpredictable world of open water can be pretty terrifying. But what if I told you that with the right strategy and training, you'll start the swim on Ironman race day feeling totally confident? In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a roadmap for exactly how to go from open water beginner to total confidence on race day. I'm going to cover everything from training session ideas, wetsuit advice, to tips on managing anxiety. I'm Coach Rob Wilby from Team Oxygen Addict. Let's get started. Okay, let's start then by talking about physical swim sessions and swim training. How do we move from the pool to open water in a way that's going to leave you feeling comfortable and confident in the open water? So firstly, timing. I'm going to recommend you do this 8 weeks out from race day, temperature permitting. Now, it might be a challenge for some of our athletes in the UK, especially if your race is early in the season in May time. It might be very hard to get 8 weeks of swimming done before race day. And the first sessions that you're going to do in open water, they're not going to be training sessions. They're going to be sessions where you're just practicing getting into open water and getting acclimated to it. It might be, especially if it's early season, that the temperature is still cool or even quite cold. So getting used to that is going to be one of the most important parts of it. Now, with the athletes that I coach within Team Oxygen Addict, we work in this way. We have some short open water skills-based sessions that we do 8 weeks out from race day, and we gradually then, as we get closer to race day, replace the key swim of the week by doing that in open water itself. But like I said, initially what we'll have you do is just get into the water, just to acclimate yourself to the temperature, just to get used to how different it feels in open water and how different it feels wearing a wetsuit. Incidentally, we've currently got a special offer on coaching with Team Oxygen Addict. If you're interested in getting some coaching, you can click the link down in the show notes and find out more down there. The initial sessions are quite short and skills based. And then what I'd encourage you to do is over the last 6 weeks moving into race day, have your key swim of the week, and with our athletes that will be their endurance swim. We'll gradually switch to doing that swim in open water. I'll always advise you to do this in a managed open water venue rather than you just turning up and swimming on your own. And I'm always going to advise you to have some kind of tow float with you so you can look after your own safety and even potentially look after the safety of other swimmers in the water as well. So a simple tow float is an absolute lifesaver here. If you're in a managed open water venue, almost certainly there are going to be buoys set out and a course for you to swim. So initially, the swim sessions are going to be just one lap of the lap that's set out. Stop there, take the micro break at the end of the lap if you can, stand up out of the water, have a little break for 5 to 30 seconds and then go again. And the closer you get to race day, the more continuous you want your open water swim to be. But initially, this is the thing to take on. Those first swim sessions are just about getting used to being in the open water. That leads us on to our second point, managing anxiety in open water, right? So firstly, it's completely natural to be anxious about swimming in open water, especially if it's your first time, if it's your first season as a triathlete. But know that athletes who have multiple seasons of swimming under the belt still get anxious before the first swim of the season. It's going to feel very different swimming in a wetsuit. It's going to feel very different swimming in water that almost certainly won't be as clear as a swimming pool. There's going to be anxiety around whether there are fish in the water. There might be weeds in the water. Your brain might even play tricks on you and start telling you that you're worried about all manner of sea monsters being in the water. The thing to relate to here is that's totally normal. Everybody goes through it. Everybody's been sure they've seen something out of the corner of the eye that might be a sea monster. The more that you're in the open water, the more you'll desensitize yourself to that and the easier it's going to be for next time. So I do recognize it can be quite alien, especially if the water isn't very clear. Swimming in open water, we tend to have a picture in our head of what it's going to look like. And especially if you're swimming in the UK, it's not uncommon for you literally not to be able to see your hand in front of your face as you reach out to do a stroke. So that takes some getting used to. And we'll go through some strategies for that later on as well. So anxiety is normal. Desensitize yourself to it gradually over time. It shouldn't, however, cross over with panic. And panic attacks are something that a small but significant number of people do experience in open water, unfortunately. It's a combination, I think, of two things. It's the anxiety, but it's also the temperature of being in cold water that's potentially much, much colder than you've swum in a pool, and the wetsuit feeling quite strange. So the temperature can mess with your breathing pattern. That in itself can lead to feelings of anxiety and panic. And so having that floaty pull buoy with you, the floaty toe float, that is the thing that is going to be your lifeline. If you manage to get to the point where you're feeling really panicked, you can just roll onto your back, you can hold onto your toe float and know that you're not going anywhere. You've got a little inflatable device with you that you can hold onto. Just stay calm. And I'd also always advise you to swim with a swim buddy. So your swim buddy will hopefully be checking in on you. That's the way through this. If you do find yourself starting to panic, I'd stop swimming face in front crawl immediately, swap to breaststroke or even tread water. Just get yourself to the point where you start to calm down, because often it is the change in the breathing pattern and the cold water exacerbating that can be something that really leads to a feeling of panic, and something that's really common in open water. We breathe out a lot more than we need to. If we're breathing every stroke in particular, we end up clearing all the carbon dioxide out of our lungs. We end up going into what might be classed as hyperventilation, right? You're basically breathing out too much and the levels of carbon dioxide in your blood get all messed up. Rolling onto your back and holding onto your toe float or treading water, just allowing yourself some time to calm down can really, really help with that. Now, next up, let's talk about the wetsuit then. We've mentioned that it's going to feel different. So first on, if it's your first time in a wetsuit, or if you haven't bought a wetsuit yet, my advice is going to be always to go and buy that wetsuit. Try it on in person if you possibly can. Try a range of different suits on. Try different sizes from the same manufacturer. Don't be afraid to spend the time to do this. And obviously that's much easier to do in a shop than it is online. But often you'll find the size of suit that you think is going to fit you isn't going to be the one that actually fits and really suits you perfectly. So go in person, have the advice of a shop assistant who knows what they're talking about. Be aware that that suit should be very, very tight. Shouldn't be uncomfortably tight, but it should be much tighter than the kind of wetsuit that you would wear to go surfing or that you might rent at the beach in the summertime. In particular, you want to make sure that there are no gaps under the arms, there are no gaps in the lower back, because if there are any gaps there, water is going to pool in that as you're swimming. So it needs to be really tight, but not uncomfortably tight. And be aware it's going to be very tight around your neck. But again, it shouldn't be uncomfortably restrictive around your neck. You do definitely want it to be so tight that no water can leak in, but you don't want it to be so tight that you feel as though you can't breathe. Again, my advice here is see the member of staff in a shop that's done this before. Make sure you get the right fitting suit, and ideally don't buy it online, okay? When you get to the open water venue, the thing to accept with a wetsuit is it's not designed to be worn dry. Who knew, right? The clue's in the name. So when you get to the venue and you're about to go for the swim, I don't want you just to jump in and start swimming. I want you to walk in until you're waist deep in water. I want you to bend down, and I want you to pull the neck of the suit forwards, bend over, and let water run down the front of the suit, and then stand up, walk out of the water, squeegee the water down your body so it goes all the way down your legs, go back in again and do it again, let water down the arm of this suit, let water in and down the arm of this suit, again come out of the water, squeegee it down. Once the water's down inside the suit, two things are going to happen. Firstly, the inside of the suit is now wet and that will get warmed up by your body heat, and that's how you're going to stay warm. Secondly, the suit will then be maneuverable on your body. You can start sliding it around up and down using your hands. Once it's wet, it'll be much easier to fit, and once it's then in that position, it will stay stuck to you and no more water will get in as you're swimming. If you do it the easy way, if you just jump in and start swimming with a dry suit, water will gradually leak into the seals and it's going to feel cold and unpleasant. So spend a few minutes to do that to make sure that that suit fits properly. Next thing to talk about are the skills of open water swimming, specifically sighting and drafting. Now, every year we have athletes who come to us and say, the swim was really long. I swam, 4,400 meters in the Ironman, so the course was set inaccurately. And I've looked at data from a different athlete in the same race, and they've swum 3.8K. And often the problem is not swimming accurately between the buoys. One of the reasons for that is it's really hard to do, and it's a skill that has to be practiced. So let's practice lifting our head up to sight every 3 to 5 strokes when we're swimming in open water. You want to be looking up at something that you can see, ideally. If there's a massive buoy in the water that you can see, that's great. But what's even better than that is if there's something in the shore in the background lined up with that buoy. The buoy might drift around in the water. You might drift around in the water because of currents or wind blowing. If you've got your view taken on a line between the buoy and, say, a particularly big tree or a building in the background, you can then make a judgment as you're swimming as to whether you're swimming straight or not. It's a skill you can learn. Some people are much better at it than others. So practice sighting every 3 to 5 strokes. You can either simply lift your entire face up out of the water to see where you're going, or you can do a little crocodile eyes where you just lift your eyes above the water and then drop the head back down. Both those techniques work. Find which one you prefer. But the sighting is something that if you do it ineffectively, you could add up to 10% extra distance. Don't really want to be doing that. So practice this in training. And lastly thing to talk about is drafting. Drafting done well can save you up to 8 seconds per 100 meters in terms of pace. Or if you want to think of it in terms of Ironman speed, that's 5 or 6 minutes off your Ironman time. Usually what you'll find is if you're swimming behind somebody, you can swim behind someone who's swimming 8 seconds per 100 faster than you, and it feels really comfortable for you. And you'll be able to practice this in training. What we often find is if you're swimming with the right person, if you're drafting, you'll feel ridiculously easy behind them. But if you pull out to try and overtake, you'll often find you can't, and you don't have the speed, even trying as hard as you can, to even get up alongside them. That's literally how much difference a good draft makes. So it's a great thing to practice this skill in training. Go with your swim buddy, swim from here to the next buoy, one of you lead, swap over at the buoy, swim to the next buoy, the other one of you lead, and practice swimming on the other one's feet. You'll have to let go of the idea of sighting while you're doing this. All your job is at that point is to stay behind the person you're drafting and training, but keep sighting at the same time, because what we want to get an idea of is you can then give feedback to your partner as to whether you think they're sighting accurately. So you are definitely going to save time swimming behind somebody, but they have to be swimming in a straight line and you have to make that judgment call. So you can go ahead and you can practice this with a partner, doing one buoy each, and then that way if you can get really effective at it, come race day, you can either end up with a much faster swim time than your fitness suggests, or you do about the swim time you thought you were going to do and save a whole ton of energy. I hope that gives you a roadmap, both in terms of physical swim sessions, managing anxiety, the wetsuit tips, and also some skill sessions that you can do. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I'd love it if you hit like and subscribe. And if you want to find out more about triathlon coaching with Team Oxygen Addict, there's a link down there underneath this video. Thanks very much for listening, everybody.